For decades, missiles represented the ultimate military advantage. Speed made them untouchable. Range made them unavoidable. Overwhelming force made them decisive. Once a missile was launched, the outcome felt inevitable. Targets had no meaningful way to respond. Cities waited. Fleets maneuvered blindly. Commanders hoped the launch would never come. Missile power shaped global military thinking because offense always moved faster than defense. That imbalance defined modern warfare for generations. But it did not last forever. Slowly, quietly, defense began to close the gap. And when it did, it changed the rules of the entire conflict. Missile warfare was built on a simple premise: strike faster than your opponent can react. Early air defense systems were never designed to stop missiles. They were built to track aircraft, large, relatively slow targets that followed predictable paths. Missiles introduced an entirely different problem. Ballistic missiles traveled into space before descending at extreme speeds. Cruise missiles hugged terrain to avoid radar detection. Reaction windows shrank from minutes to seconds. During the Cold War, intercepting a missile was considered impractical. Radar systems lacked resolution. Computers lacked processing power. Interceptors lacked precision. Military planners accepted that missiles could not be reliably stopped once launched. As a result, global strategy shifted toward deterrence rather than defense. The assumption was simple: if you could not stop a missile, you had to prevent its use through fear of retaliation. But while doctrine focused on deterrence, engineers were working on interception. Advances in radar technology, digital tracking, and guidance systems slowly chipped away at the problem. The idea was no longer to stop every missile, but to increase the chance that a missile would fail. That shift would prove critical. Intercepting a missile is fundamentally harder than launching one. The attacker controls timing, location, and trajectory. The defender reacts under pressure with incomplete information. A missile moves at several times the speed of sound. Sometimes faster. It may maneuver mid-flight. It may deploy decoys. It may arrive as part of a larger attack. The defender must detect the launch, classify the threat, track its path, calculate an intercept solution, launch an interceptor, and guide it to a collision, all within seconds. If any step fails, the missile reaches its target. There is no second chance. Failure is immediate and visible. This reality limited early missile defense systems. They worked in controlled tests but failed under complex conditions. A single missed calculation or delayed response meant catastrophic consequences. For decades, this constraint reinforced the belief that missile defense would always lag behind offense. But incremental improvements accumulated. Sensors improved, networks expanded, processing speeds increased. The constraint remained, but it became manageable. The turning point was the adoption of layered missile defense. Instead of relying on a single interceptor or sensor, modern defense systems integrated multiple layers of detection and engagement. Each layer addressed a different phase of missile flight and reduced uncertainty at every step. Systems like the Patriot missile defense system focus on terminal phase interception, engaging missiles as they descend toward their targets. Aegis ballistic missile defense operates at longer ranges using powerful ship-mounted radar capable of tracking ballistic missiles even outside the atmosphere. Together, these systems form overlapping coverage zones. Radar sensors detect launches almost immediately. Tracking systems refine trajectories. Fire control systems assign interceptors. Multiple interceptors may be launched against a single target to increase probability of success. If one interceptor fails, another can engage. If one radar loses track, another takes over. This layered approach did not eliminate risk, but it changed the balance. Missile defense was no longer a single point of failure. It became a network, and that network forced attackers to reconsider long-held assumptions. Deployment. Once layered missile defense systems were deployed in real operational environments, their impact became undeniable. Missiles were intercepted in live scenarios. Rocket attacks were disrupted mid-air. ballistic missile tests were neutralized before reaching their targets. These events demonstrated that missiles were no longer guaranteed to succeed. This did not make missile warfare obsolete. It made it adaptive. Attackers responded by increasing the number of missiles launched in a single strike. They altered flight paths. They introduced decoys designed to confuse radar systems. They tested new guidance methods and maneuvering warheads. Defense systems responded in turn by improving sensor fusion, automation, and response speed. Interceptors became faster and more accurate. Radar coverage expanded. Data sharing between platforms improved. Missile defense did not stop the threat. It reshaped it. Every interception changed how future missiles were designed. Once layered missile defense proved viable, global missile doctrine began to change. The old assumption that a single missile would reach its target no longer held. This forced offensive planners to rethink how missile attacks would be conducted. Instead of relying on precision, they began to rely on volume. If one missile could be intercepted, 10 might overwhelm a defense system. If predictable trajectories could be tracked, new flight paths would be developed. Missiles became faster, lower, and more maneuverable. Some were designed to change direction mid-flight. Others deployed decoys that looked identical to real warheads on radar. Electronic countermeasures were added to interfere with tracking systems. Complexity became a weapon in itself. Defense systems had to respond in real time to these changes. Radar networks became more interconnected. Interceptor launch sequences became more automated. Decision-making shifted from human operators to machine-assisted targeting. The offense-defense cycle accelerated. Every improvement on one side forced a reaction from the other, tightening the feedback loop between missile design and missile interception. Global reaction. As layered missile defense systems proved their effectiveness, their influence spread far beyond the countries that deployed them. Military planners around the world began studying every successful interception, every radar track, and every interceptor launch. Nations that once relied on missile superiority were suddenly forced to rethink their strategies. Some accelerated their own missile programs. Others began developing countermeasures specifically designed to defeat Patriot and Aegis-style systems. At the same time, Allied nations began requesting missile defense coverage. Naval fleets were repositioned. Radar networks were expanded. Shared tracking data became part of international security agreements. Missile defense was no longer just a national asset. It became a regional one. This created a new type of arms race. Instead of racing to build more missiles, nations began racing to build better ways to survive them. Defense became a strategic force in its own right, shaping alliances, deployments, and military planning across entire continents. The cost of defense. Missile defense is not just technologically demanding, it is economically demanding. Interceptors cost far more than the missiles they are designed to stop. Radar systems require constant maintenance. Data networks must operate continuously. Personnel must be trained to operate systems that function at machine speed. This imbalance creates a strategic dilemma. Attackers can often launch cheaper weapons, while defenders must spend enormous resources to stop them. That reality forces governments to make difficult decisions about coverage, priorities, and risk tolerance. No nation can defend everything all the time. This is why layered defense is used selectively, protecting the most critical assets: cities, command centers, military bases, and strategic infrastructure. Missile defense does not create perfect safety. It creates managed risk. And that calculation influences everything from military budgets to diplomatic strategy. Modern missile warfare is no longer about simply launching the fastest or most accurate weapon. It is about creating uncertainty. Analysts now expect future missile systems to prioritize unpredictability over precision. Missiles will be designed to confuse radar, evade tracking, and exploit gaps in defensive coverage. Saturation attacks, launching many missiles at once, because layered defense systems are designed to handle limited numbers, not unlimited waves. Defense, in turn, will become more automated and more networked. Systems like Patriot and Aegis BMD will rely increasingly on artificial intelligence to track, classify, and engage targets faster than human operators ever could. The goal will not be to stop every missile, but to reduce the effectiveness of an attack enough that it fails to achieve its objective. Missile defense did not end missile warfare. It transformed it into a constant race between detection and deception, speed and confusion, interception and evasion. Every shield changes the sword. Layered missile defense did not eliminate the missile threat, but it forced every attacker to rethink how missiles are used. What was once a guaranteed strike has become a calculated risk, and as long as defense continues to improve, the weapons designed to defeat it will continue to evolve. The fight is no longer just about who can launch first, it is about who can adapt the fastest.